Tonight, Rishi Sunak launches his kitchen sink manifesto, which he hopes will close the gap with Labour in the polls. The Prime Minister announces £17 billion worth of tax cuts and £1 billion in extra spending. We'll take you through it all and ask if the former Chancellor's sums add up. But it's Nigel Farage's reform biting at the heels of the Conservatives in the polls tonight. His party are now just 1 point behind. I'll be joined live by the Conservative Culture Secretary to ask if the manifesto is too little, too late. And with both parties' spending plans back in the spotlight, I'll also be speaking to Labour's Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones. All that and more with Guto Harri and Sarkar, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, today was one of Rishi Sunak's last chances to save his election campaign. The launch of the Conservative Party manifesto, the day when the Prime Minister revealed his policy platform and his plans to change the country if he's granted another 5 years in office. He's 20 points behind in the polls, so he needed a game-changing moment. And look, from a purely policy perspective, there was a lot in the manifesto. Cuts to national insurance, including scrapping the main rate of self-employed national insurance completely. A promise to halve immigration, 1.6 million new homes, the introduction of national service for young people. But here's the thing. Taken individually, these policies, I'm sure, poll well and are popular among the voters they're trying to win over. But I can't work out what the story is, the narrative of the campaign. You know, if you think back to other Conservative campaign successes, levelling up, get Brexit done, even the austerity narrative that got David Cameron elected in 2010. Now, you'll have your own opinion about whether they were the right narratives or even if they were truthful ones, but they were cohesive stories about why people should vote for that party. It feels a bit like Rishi Sunak is focusing too much on the maths and not enough on the poetry of the election. Because great campaigners are really, at their heart, great storytellers. And honestly, I am not sure what Rishi Sunak's story is yet. We're going to deep dive into the Conservative Party manifesto now to tell you exactly what it is that Rishi Sunak is promising if he is given another 5 years. Now, there's a lot on tax. In some ways, I guess this is the story that he is trying to tell. So, if he's elected, he wants a 2p cut in national insurance by 2027, and he also wants to abolish the main rate of national insurance for the self-employed completely. The triple lock would be strengthened, the triple lock plus they're calling it now, so that's a bit of a bung for pensioners. And there's also a commitment to have no rises in the three main taxes, in VAT, income tax or corporation tax. So there we go. Let's turn now to immigration, shall we? Another big part of the manifesto. So they pledged to halve migration with an annual legal cap on the number of visas that are granted every year. They also say they want to implement the Rwanda plan, something, of course, we've heard an awful lot about in recent years. This is one to really take a bit of notice to, because there isn't a firm commitment to leave the ECHR. So it was a commitment to always choose our security over the rulings of foreign courts. There was a bit of a question mark about whether he would completely leave the ECHR. This is what Rishi Sunak said earlier today.
Migration has been too high in recent years, and we have a clear plan to reduce it. Last year, we announced changes which mean 300,000 people who were previously eligible to come here now can't. And we will introduce a migration cap that means Parliament, your elected representatives, will vote on how many people should be able to come here every year. Our plan is clear. We will halve migration as we have halved inflation and then reduce it every single year.
Well, let's talk about health now, something that I know many of you feel very strongly about. So the Conservative Party are promising to increase NHS spending above inflation, increases in NHS spending every single year. They also say that they want to recruit an extra 92,000 nurses and 28,000 doctors over the next 5 years. Remember that ban on young people ever being able to smoke? They want to bring that back. The return of the tobacco and vapes bill, that was dropped due to the sudden election being called. There's also, of course, that big plan to reintroduce mandatory national service for 18-year-olds. They want to have a legal ban on mobile phones in schools. And they also say that they want to continue the expansion of free childcare that was being rolled out for all children of 9 months and older. They want to continue doing that, so it's rolled out in full. Rishi Sunak also announced some big changes that he wants to see in higher education.
We won't cling to outdated ideas, such as the belief that the only route to success is through university. So we will curb funding to rip off degrees and use it to fund 100,000 new high-quality apprenticeships.
There were some big pledges on housing too. The Conservatives promising an extra 1.6 million homes in the next Parliament. That's actually slightly more than Labour is pledging. They also want to make permanent changes to stamp duty for first-time buyers, and the Help to Buy scheme returns for 2 years only. The question, I guess, is, where are the cutbacks to pay for all that? Because the Conservatives outlined big savings in 3 areas across the next Parliament. They claim that they can save a whopping £45 billion through welfare reform, cutting benefits in other words. Another £20 billion they are earmarked for saving by tackling tax evasion and tax avoidance, and £10 billion saved by cutting back on the number of civil servants. We're going to have a lot more analysis of these numbers and whether they add up later on the programme. But Rishi Sunak says the money will go towards defence.
We're raising defence investment to 2.5% of GDP by 2030 to deal with the increasingly uncertain world that we live in. This is the biggest sustained increase in the defence budget since the end of the Cold War, and one that Keir Starmer will not match. Labour would rather keep the civil service at its bloated, pandemic level, rather than give our armed forces the equipment they need.
Rishi Sunak there having a bit of a pop at Keir Starmer's plans. We will hear more from Labour's manifesto on Thursday. But for now, this is one of my favourite parts of the campaign. We can see where all the parties have been travelling, and this really tells us such a lot about where they're focusing on. So as we've been hearing, this is where the Conservative Party launched their election manifesto at Silverstone, the racetrack in Northamptonshire. And this blue dot here, that's the Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross. He was out and about in Edinburgh. Not a day off for Labour, though, of course. So Keir Starmer and the Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting went to Teesside today. They visited a school in Middlesbrough to campaign for Labour's Child Health Action Plan. And the Liberal Democrats were in Devon and Somerset. This is really an area that they're focusing on. They wanted to talk up their call for a rural GP fund. Up in Scotland, there we have it. That is the SNP's Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn. He was out and about campaigning in Aberdeen today. And the Reform UK leader, Nigel Farage, well, he was in South Yorkshire and then Ashfield with the Conservative defector to Reform, Lee Anderson. Well, snapping at the Conservative Party heels is Reform UK. Sky's latest exclusive voting intention poll with YouGov showing the party just 1 percentage point behind the Conservatives. We are going to be talking to Sam Coates, who you can see there on that high street there a little bit later, because the survey carried out today ahead of their manifesto launch together. We're going to hear from our Deputy Political Editor in a moment. He has been out on the campaign trail with Nigel Farage.
Wherever he goes, Nigel Farage draws a crowd. It's not always a friendly one. The Reform leader's bus in Barnsley when 2 objects appeared to be thrown at him. One man has been arrested on suspicion of public order offences.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank
Good,
you.
good, very well.
A warmer reception down the road in Ashfield in Nottinghamshire. These voters are exactly who Rishi Sunak needs to win over with his manifesto. The Tories won this seat in 2019. The then local MP defected to Reform. The Farage effect could now leave the Conservatives trailing in 3rd place.
We've interrupted your lunch. I'm sorry about that.
That's who it is, Nigel Farage. Yeah, I thought it was.
Targeted voters turning against the Tories.
I don't like Conservative or Labour.
And what's the thing that's really swayed you this time?
Nigel Farage, to be honest. He says a lot of things that we want.
Doing.
Yeah.
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 Like what?
Immigration to start with.
We've just ain't got... It's a wonder we haven't sunk. The amount of people that's on it.
What do you think of Rishi Sunak?
Not a lot.
Does Rishi Sunak infuse you?
No.
You've made my dictator code.
The Tory manifesto targeting his voters. He insists he's not concerned.
It's the same manifesto. They do this at every election. They pretend to be on the right at every election and then govern as Liberals. They are dishonest. And frankly, I just think it's a bunch of lies, the whole thing. I don't believe any of it, and nor do the public.
That's his spin, but exclusive Sky News YouGov polling shows just how rough things look for Rishi Sunak. Labour is on 38%, Conservatives on 18%. That's the joint lowest in this parliament, and only 1 point ahead of Reform UK on 17%, the Lib Dems on 15% and Greens on 8%.
An annual cap on immigration, tax cuts for pensioners, help for the higher earners. All of these policies designed to attract those on the right who might be tempted by reform. Our poll shows the challenge that Rishi Sunak faces, but can he be trusted to deliver the whole package?
In dire need of a bounce in the polls, are these policies enough?
What did you make of the national service policy that Rishi Sunak announced the other day?
I thought that was a bit wishy-washy. Seemed a bit neither here nor there. I don't agree with the Rwanda policy. I don't think it is a very good idea.
A packed Tory manifesto in a fight for the right. But are their voters still buying what they're being served? Sam Coates, Sky News, Ashfield.
Well, here is the full list of candidates standing for the constituency of Ashfield. That is the full candidate list for Ashfield at the general election. Well, as we've been saying, today was an opportunity for the Prime Minister to shift the dial. Some in his party hoping for a big splashy tax cut. But however the Conservatives present it, I think it will be interesting to see how it goes down with voters. The person who has been looking through all of this for us is our economics and data editor, Ed Conway. Ed, what have you been crunching through today?
Well, you said there was a tax cut, but it wasn't necessarily quite as big as I think a lot of people would have liked. But let's kind of do the numbers first of all, shall we, and just kind of give you a sense of what we're talking about here. First of all, this is kind of the big picture, and this is basically showing you how much the Conservatives are saying they want to cut taxes and indeed raise money in the coming years. So each of these bars, anything below the line is money going out of the government into our pockets, theoretically. And you can see that goes down and down and down. It gets quite big, about £17 billion by 2029, 2030. And then supposedly that is all balanced out by the fact that you've got money coming in from welfare and from also kind of cutting back on tax avoidance. And then these little green bits, that's extra spending. It's actually bigger than it looks, but I'll come on to that if you want to in a second. But if we take this bit here, it's worth just focusing, Sophie, on this question of tax, isn't it? Because there's been so much focus on it. And actually the numbers here, they are quite big. You're talking about £10 billion by the end of the forecast horizon. That's not nothing. And the idea of that is to bring down employee NICs so it's halved over the course of a few years. It's 2p, but obviously there have been previous cuts, and so they'd be halving it if you include all of that. And then you've got other bits and pieces like abolishing self-employed NICs. Not quite as big as that because you're not talking about as many people, but nonetheless, that is definitely striking. And I think if you take all of that in total, it's not nothing, but obviously the question is whether it's quite as much as people might have wanted out of this, because,
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because, like you say, it's a sizable amount of money.
Yeah.
And I start the programme saying, what's the story Rishi Sunak's trying to tell? And I feel like the story he's trying to tell is that he's a tax cutter.
Yeah.
Can he tell that story based on this? Is the tax burden going down?
I think for that, yeah, you'd have to have the tax burden going down. And back to a chart that I know we've talked about before, you'd probably be familiar with. This is showing you the tax burden in the UK as a percentage of GDP, and this goes all the way back to 1948. Okay, so this is kind of a story of history. There you've got the post-war period where taxes were really high to pay for the war, and it bounces around a bit. But this is post-COVID, isn't it? So it's up quite a lot. and actually was going to be heading even higher based on the current kind of plans from the government. So that's the OBR numbers, that line, dotted line going up like that. This manifesto, as you say, Sophie, if he wanted to be a tax-cutting Prime Minister, you'd probably want to see that line go down, wouldn't you? Well, here's what it does. So, yeah, it goes. It's going up. There's a gap. I mean, you can see, if we might have to zoom in, given how kind of we're relatively small. We're talking about the difference between the two. But 17.2 billion pounds.
It's all right. You can come.
Yeah, so 17.2 billion pounds. It's not nothing. It really isn't nothing. This is not nothing. But it also, that line's still going up, isn't it? You know, your eyes are not deceiving you. That is still going up. So the tax burden is still going up. And actually, when you look at that line there, that's an 80-year high. And so, you know, yes, it is going up less quickly than it would have been otherwise, but you are still the Prime Minister, based on these plans, who would be bringing the tax burden up to the highest level, basically, in the post-war period. So.
And that's the problem. If you're trying to say, I'm a guy who loves cutting tax.
It's a problem if you want to say you're cutting tax. And it's also a problem given that, I mean, that's not the only issue with this manifesto. I mean, and we can pick holes in a lot of the numbers here. We talked about the Lib Dem manifesto before. But there are some quite big holes on this side of it. So that's your tax bit, OK? And that's your money going out. There's a bit of spending as well. Some question marks, like I said, over that, because it looks small, and it kind of is small, but it's only small basically because you're assuming quite a lot of austerity. So actually, that should be bigger because of all the extra defence spending. But it's like, oh, it's OK. We're going to kind of do some cutting civil service, so it's going to be fine. Let's not look at the details too much. But then the question is how you raise that £18 billion. And lo and behold, the Tories have done more or less the same thing as the Lib Dems and said, we're going to miraculously be able to get so much more tax through kind of cutting down on avoidance.
This happens every manifesto. I'll be honest, Ed, it drives me mad.
I mean, imagine what it does to me. Every manifesto that I can remember, going back to Gordon Brown, they've said, oh, look, we're going to cut back on tax avoidance. And it's just like a free bit of money that gives you the kind of chance to say, OK, look, we've got money coming in so we can do the cutting. But I think maybe the bit that's possibly even more questionable is this. So they assume an enormous cut in the welfare bill of £12 billion. It's not totally implausible because it has been done before, but the point is it has been cut so much already that you've got to kind of question whether it's going to be quite so easy to do it in the future. So I think there's legitimate questions over that. But lo and behold, miraculously take these two things and it adds up to, guess what? Precisely the amount that you need to justify all those tax cuts. But the issue for Rishi Sunak, back to that main point, is he's not quite able to get enough of this red stuff to make that even bigger and then to get that overall level of tax down. So I think for a lot of people, this is just not really kind of ambitious enough.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, Ed. I always look forward to your crunching through the numbers on manifesto days. Ed, thank you very much indeed. Right, Ed's been doing the numbers. Let's talk about the politics now, shall we? We can talk to Sam Coates, who's in Ashfield still. Sam, it's a huge day for Rishi Sunak, always an important day, but perhaps particularly because so much is riding on Rishi Sunak's ability to change the narrative of the campaign. Has he done enough?
Well, I think the Conservatives tonight will be nervous. Nervous because they have to now wait and see what the public make of it. Look, Rishi Sunak's done the work. He's handed in his homework, as it were, and he's got to wait for the public to mark it on July the 4th. But you can see the scale of the problem from that exclusive YouGov Sky poll that we brought you a few moments ago, showing that the Conservatives are on their joint lowest figure in this Parliament. Now, Sophie, you asked at the top of the programme whether or not this manifesto was too little, too late. I wonder whether or not it's too much, too late. Because when you go through it, there are just dozens and dozens and dozens of different policies targeting all sorts of different groups, whether it's pensioners or working families or families that are a bit more better off or first-time buyers. When you sort of slice and dice the electorate, the Conservative manifesto throws something at all of them. But the question is, I think, are people listening? I thought that Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, asked an interesting question today about whether or not an element of this manifesto wasn't a bit, well, Jeremy Corbyn-like. Now, that's extraordinary chutzpah from the Labour leader, given that he defended and stood under that 2019 manifesto, the chutzpah of somebody who's 20 points ahead. But I did wonder whether he had a point, because there is so much in there. Yet, as you and Ed were talking about, I wonder whether the thing that a lot of Tories really wanted wasn't. Now, you were talking about the tax burden due to go up. I was fascinated when Rishi Sunak was asked about the tax burden, and he gave a very complicated, slightly obfuscatory answer where he said that the tax burden will come down compared to forecasts. Language that most people would take away as thinking it's going to come down. It's not, it's going up. That shows to me he can't quite admit the truth. The problem for Rishi Sunak is the scale of what he needs to turn around. And given where he is in the polls, it's such a tall order with not long left to go now.
Sam, thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates there, our Deputy Political Editor. I'm pleased to say that the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Lucy Frazer, joins us now to discuss the Conservative Party manifesto. Great to have you here. Thank you
nice to be here, Sophie.
In the studio. I guess I started the programme talking about, what's the story of this election? All kind of great campaigns need a narrative. So what's the story of the manifesto today, do you think?
The story of the manifesto is 14 years ago, we inherited a very poor economy where Labour, as it has done every single time it's been in power, overspent and left us with no money. And we turned the economy around. And we was turning a corner, and then we had COVID. And what the Prime Minister, then the Chancellor, did was stand by people, back them up, pay their salaries to make sure that the economy continued to thrive, spending £400 billion. And then straight after that, we had the energy crisis caused by the war in Ukraine, where we paid bills of people. And that meant that we've had a period where the Conservatives have been supporting people who needed support. And notwithstanding that, what we've done over the last 14 years is turn the economy around. What the statisticians have said is that we bounced back from the pandemic quicker than most other G7 countries, that our economy is growing faster than most other G7 countries. And what he is able to do now the economy is starting to turn a corner, is set out a plan for the future. And what that plan for the future is tax cuts, not tax rises, as you will see under Labour. It's secure borders and it's security for our future.
I mean, there's a couple of things to kind of pick up there. First, I think some of our viewers might be asking if it's really credible to say that, the economy is in the state that you say it is right now. They're feeling it in their pockets, their mortgage rates. You say that growth is rebounding, but growth has been, pretty limping along the bottom for a while now. But I just want to pick up on what you said about tax cuts, because Ed Conway's just been showing us the numbers, and taxes are still due to go up under these plans. Yes, less quickly, but taxes are due to go up overall. So you're not cutting taxes.
Well, let me deal with both of those points. So first of all, what I said is the economy is starting to turn a corner. We see that in two ways. We see it in terms of the figures. So inflation's come down from over 11% down to just over 2%. That's a significant turnaround of the economy. But I think we're also seeing...
How's debt doing?
Well, debt is projected to fall, which is what the Prime Minister committed to do. But what we're also seeing, and we're just starting to see it, I see, and I've been canvassing in my constituency day in, day out, knocking on doors, and I think what we're starting to see is people feeling the effects of that. Not totally yet, but people are telling me that their mortgages are coming down, their energy prices are coming down. So I think we are starting to see the economy turn around.
How can you say that you're cutting taxes when taxes are going up?
Because in our manifesto, we set out a number of taxes. We set out tax cuts for people who are working and employed.
The overall tax burden is going up. That's the numbers, that's the empirical truth, right?
There are two key points. We are cutting individual taxes for a number
But you admit the tax burden's going up.
Well, let me deal with that in a minute. But I think it's really important to emphasise that what we've announced today in the manifesto is a tax cut for people who are employed. building on in terms of the national insurance cuts,
Okay.
building on what we've already
Okay.
set out. We've got tax cuts, which you refer to, for the self-employed. We've got tax cuts for pensioners, saying the state pension will never be taxed. And we've also got tax cuts for families. When you talk about, because I do want to answer the point that Ed talked about, in terms of tax burden overall, it was projected to be at a certain level. What we are announcing today is a tax cut of 1% year on year.
No, it's still going up, though. It's still going up.
Sophie, I think everybody understands.
Just acknowledge it. Just acknowledge it. Okay. It sounds like you're just evading it.
I'm absolutely not evading it. I think we need to be honest with people. Okay. And the honesty that we need to remind people of are the things I started with. We spent £400
be honest
billion
with people then. Be honest with people. Our taxes are still projected to go up under your plans. The overall tax burden.
We spent £400 billion.
No, you said you want to be honest with people. This is your chance.
Well,
that's right, isn't it?
So the projections at the moment show that tax levels will be X, and the result of the manifesto is that year on year on year on year, what we have managed to do is reduce that tax burden so that it will come down.
That's not correct. The tax burden is projected to go up.
Well, what you saw from Ed's chart was the gap.
No, I'm not talking about the gap. I'm talking about the overall tax burden is projected to go up.
What Ed's chart showed was that we've managed to find tax cuts from what the position would otherwise be, and I think it's really important to state
it's going up less quickly, but it's still going up.
It's going to come down by 1% year on year on year from what it was projected to be. And the important thing is, the really important thing, Sophie, is that Labour are not offering any of those tax cuts. And instead of that, they are offering tax rises. So people's taxes will go up by at least £2,000 if they vote for Labour and we get a Labour government. And I think that is a really important distinction to make between our manifesto and what we're going to hear from the Labour Party.
We will talk about the Labour Party plans later, including when they publish their manifesto, and also with Darren Jones later on the programme as well. I just want to look at your costings document, because I guess what I'm trying to work out, right, is, not talking about the rights or the wrongs, the policies, but trying to work out if this is a serious manifesto from a party that thinks it could have a chance of enacting these plans, right? So just looking at the kind of costings document, you're saying that you want to save £20 billion over the next Parliament, so going up to £6 billion, by tackling the tax gap, so cracking down on tax avoidance and evasion. I mean, that's just ridiculous, isn't it?
Let me be clear. It's a serious plan for a serious government. And I think what you've seen from the Prime Minister when he was Chancellor and when he was Prime Minister is that he is totally on top of the detail.
20 billion... Do you really think you can get £20 billion by tackling the tax gap?
Well, you talked about the tax gaps, so let me address that, because I was a Treasury Minister. I was Financial Secretary to the Treasury, and these are the sorts of submissions that were put to me. How much can we save in each budget? And the reality is that if you put more money into HMRC, so if you pay more people to work in HMRC, you do reduce tax avoidance. We see it in every single budget. At the moment, in the last few years, we have managed through avoidance to recover over £90 billion. So yes,
so you're putting some more money into HMRC to do it?
You put in more money.
How much more money are you putting in?
That will... I can't tell you exactly what we'll put in, but it will all be costed. But what I can tell you, and be very clear...
You just said you can do it if you put money in, but you can't tell me how much money you're going to put into HMRC
So there's a calculation which HMRC do for every single budget, and this manifesto is absolutely no different, that you can recover significant sums from people who are avoiding tax if you chase them. And we have in the past, over the last few years, recovered over £90 billion. So yes, I do think that £6 billion is realistic.
Another way you're planning on saving money is through Quango efficiency. So that's £1.2 billion a year. I mean, I remember the bonfire of the Quangos that you had last time. How are you going to kind of pick through the embers to find some more Quangos? What are Quango efficiencies?
Well, we're already in the middle of a review. So every single department is already doing reviews of its arm's-length bodies to see how it can get efficiencies. So I'm confident that those projections would be...
What is the Quango efficient? What is it?
Well, we have a huge number of arm's-length bodies where we give responsibility. Well, we always need to keep it under review because we delegate responsibility to arm's length bodies. They grow and grow and grow and grow. And I think it's absolutely right that we look at that.
I mean, Paul Johnson of the IFS put it quite succinctly, the Institute for Fiscal Studies. The Conservatives have promised £17 billion a year of tax cuts and a big hike in defence spending. Those are definite giveaways paid for by uncertain, unspecific and apparently victimless savings. Forgive a degree of scepticism. I guess this is my kind of wider point here, right? People are intelligent, the public is intelligent. They know debt is high, public services are being squeezed, the tax burden is really, really high, despite, you know, what you say. They know how difficult the economic picture is. And you're really saying you can cut all these taxes and do all those things and no one's going to have any bad decisions at all. It's all going to be done through tax evasion or quangos. I mean, that's just not realistic, is it?
Well, there's also a massive amount in relation to the welfare budget. What we're saying that is that absolutely we need to support people who need support, but at the moment the welfare budget for working aged people is absolutely significant. It's £59 billion at the moment, going up to £90 billion. And so a significant amount of money is also to make sure that people are not claiming benefits when they shouldn't be claiming benefits and they can get out back into work, which is something that will also boost the economy as well.
On the benefits, there is concern about the knock-on impact that might have on families and children in particular. You know, I couldn't help but notice Rishi Sunak saying today that we reduce child poverty. I mean, that's not true, is it? Child poverty on every measure, relative poverty, absolute poverty, before housing costs, after housing costs. There are more children in poverty now, aren't there?
My understanding is the statistics are that we have reduced poverty. We've reduced poverty in workless households. We've got 4 million people more in employment.
I've looked at the child poverty statistics and I just don't think that's true.
I think it is true. I think it is true. And I think also what we have... Can I make something really clear? Because the choice... This election is a choice. It's a choice between a party who believes in tax cuts, who believes that you support people into work, who believes in aspiration and enterprise. And the choice is between that or the Labour Party, and we've got absolutely no idea what they're offering. They're really scared to say what their plan is. You've got a really detailed plan from us. It's about 70 pages. We tell you exactly what we're doing in every single area from a Prime Minister who is a details man, who understands figures, and that's why I have confidence in our manifesto and the figures within it. And what we have from the Labour Party is they say you can make no savings at all from the welfare budget. Zero, even though it's going up to £90 billion. Okay. He's also saying that you're going to get tax rises and not tax cuts. That is the choice for people at the next election.
You're the Culture Secretary. What's more likely? England winning the Euros or Rishi Sunak winning the election?
I'd like both. Absolutely.
Go on, you've got to choose. Difficult decisions, that's what we're all about.
Well, look, I think I have a huge amount of faith in Gareth Southgate. I think he's a great manager, and the England team, it would be just so fantastic if they won, and I really hope they do, but of course I'm a Conservative, and I truly believe that we have the values, we have the right policies and the right team to make sure that this country goes from strength to strength and helps individuals across the country.
Lucy Frazer, thank you very much indeed. Lucy Frazer there. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, we'll have reaction from our guests, the former Downing Street Head of Communications, Guto Harri, and the contributing editor of Novara Media, Ash Sarkar. Don't go anywhere.
Westminster may seem a long way from Grimsby and Cleethorpes, but not for long. With a general election around the corner, we're bringing you Sunak versus Starmer live from Grimsby. Putting their cases forward to you and facing questions from a live audience. Who will convince you to give them the keys to this place? The battle for number 10. Get the full story first on Sky News.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent. I've reported from around the world and around the UK.
I'm Mark Stone, I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, DC. And beyond the United States, from across the world, I report on the biggest stories.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. I remember some of the worst of the violence here.
I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Hello, welcome back. Right, let's get the thoughts of our duo for this evening, shall we? The former Director of Communications to Boris Johnson, Guto Harri, and the contributing editor at Novara Media, Ash Sarkar. Great to have you both on the programme this evening. Guto, to you first. What do you make of the Conservative manifesto?
I think what's good, and you've just proved over the last half hour, there's enough to talk about. There's enough to kick around, and that is better than how this campaign started, where we're talking about the weather and then we're talking about, you know, absent without leave or not being in the right photo. There's good meaty stuff, and you can drown in the detail and you can contest the detail, but if there's one thing that, you know, nobody's going to say about Rishi Sunak is he cannot do maths, cannot do TT. He can, so that's an advantage. But in the end, this is about values. This is about, if the money is available, would you actually spend it on benefits, or would you spend a disproportionate amount on people who work hard and deserve to be rewarded more generously? And that is opening a genuine ideological divide here, which, you know, is done very subtly at the moment, but that's the signal that's being sent out there. And I think it's starting to bring this campaign a little bit more alive.
What do you reckon, Ash?
I think that shows you how low the bar is, because the manifesto's launched and you go, well, look, you guys are talking about it. It's their job to talk about it. They'd talk about it even if it was just a picture of Scrooge McDuck in there. They'd have to. I think when it comes to the content of it, the first thing is that the number one issue for voters in this country, regardless of what way they vote in 2019, is the NHS. There aren't serious solutions for the crisis of staffing or the crisis of beds in the NHS. There's this sort of wishful thinking of, oh, well, we're going to have this many extra doctors. The problem that we found over the last, especially 5 years, is staff retention. So it's not that we're just simply not training enough doctors, it's that we can't keep them because of pay and conditions. It's going to be very expensive to resolve, and that's a central question which is being ducked by Rishi Sunak. The second thing, which I think is really important, is that you're saying, OK, well, do you want to essentially funnel money towards people who are working or people who are on benefits? Lots of people on benefits are working. People are reliant on the state to top up their paltry pay packets. They're having to rely on universal credit in the state a lot more. And we also have a less healthy and an older population than we did 14 years ago.
We also have 2.8 million people who are deemed too sick to work. And that is a
and
huge
how many of those
number
do you think?
compared
How
to-
many of those do you think
Well, I
are
don't know,
pulling
but
your
it's-
leg?
But
Go on.
do you
How many of them are
do you
lying?
think that this generation is a lot unhealthier and a lot less capable in an age when it's easier to work with disabilities than ever? There are jobs that all kinds of people can do and do
evidence-
heroically. And so the idea that there is a greater number of people who are incapable of working now than there was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago does seem quite strange.
With all due respect,
and that we need
we're
a greater
having such a
civil
nice
service.
chat before this, but you are denying the facts in front of your face. If you look at something like the report by Michael Marmot, where he looked at the relationship between austerity and poor health outcomes, austerity has made people less healthy. People are getting sicker, and also we have come through a pandemic which has had a hugely, negative impact on people's health.
I think, and that's dominating this whole campaign.
You can see the ideological divides, I guess, that's the whole point of election campaigns, isn't it? Exactly what you said. You can see them being played out on the programme. I feel like the million-dollar question is this going to be enough to change the campaign? What do you think, Guto? Hand on heart.
Do you know what? It's not one of those campaigns that was ever going to come alive, if you like. We were never going to say, wow, take me to the sunny uplands. You know, we don't have a Tony Blair here. We don't have a Boris Johnson. I'd pick the two. We don't even have a David Cameron, who's a kind of, version of that Blair genre. What we have is two very capable guys, as if they're talking to headhunters, or even being interviewed by the board, trying to tell us, I'd probably do a better job than he would. And that's the tone of this campaign. And you could say that that's what grown-up politics should be like. It's just not very exciting, is it? But it's important, and it matters. And they're both capable enough. So now we're starting to get at things where there is a difference. And I think what Labour are getting away with is just saying what they will not do. They're not saying a lot about what they would do. And what the Conservatives have started doing, and maybe there's nothing to lose at this stage, but starting to talk about things that are going further. And frankly, in the end, if you want to create the NHS, you need to grow the economy, you need to deliver the sort of tax revenues that allow you to invest in the NHS.
Ash, do you agree about the kind of lack of excitement in the campaign?
I don't think anyone's heart is set aflame by Keir Starmer versus Rishi Sunak, unless you lead a deeply sad life. You're not going to find that exciting. I think when it comes to the Conservatives, they haven't done enough to turn things around. And quite simply, I think that the minute Liz Truss ended up machine gunning your core voters by pushing through a mini budget which led to interest rates being hiked, it was game over, right? Housing decides the way people vote in this country. It has done for 14 years. And she really did just shoot you guys in the foot big time. There's nothing in this manifesto which I think can regain that kind of trust once it's been lost. I think you're right to say that Labour are the beneficiaries of overall low expectations. And I wonder if they will be ducking some of the more difficult questions for them and go for it in their first budget instead.
Interesting stuff. We'll have more from both of you throughout the programme, Guto and Ash there. Now, we've been talking about it today because we're going to be live in Grimsby tomorrow for our special leaders event, The Battle for Number 10. That's from 7 p.m. on Sky News. And as part of that Target Town series, we can bring you some exclusive polling of towns like Grimsby that are expected to play a key role in the election. Here's Sky's People and Politics correspondent, Nick Martin.
Straight in then, gent. £4, 20, 40, 60, 60.
At 7 o'clock in the morning, the bidding starts. The price of fish is high this morning and no one is happy about that. But some days here are more memorable.
5 years ago we had a visit from Boris Johnson and we had a whale of a time. And since then it's been a massive change.
Paddy, you having that one?
What I'd like to hear from Keir Starmer and from Rishi Sunak, what their intentions are for business. And it's not just about the fish industry, and obviously in Grimsby it will be about fish, but it's about business on a wider level.
Sold!
When Boris was here, he was like a film star. I don't think the others will quite get the same reaction.
What's changed?
What's changed? The country.
What's happened since then, of course, is a cost of living crisis, a pandemic, the invasion of Ukraine, and that's changed the mindset of people in towns like these. If the tide has turned, we want to know why. So we polled people in 11 key seats, including Grimsby and Cleethorpes. They're Tory now, but we're all Labour for most of the last 30 years. They're all in the north of England or the Midlands and outside of big cities.
In these seats, whilst most voters say they don't trust either party on the big issues, Labour is slightly ahead of the Conservatives. So immigration, the health service, the economy, who do you trust with that?
I'd have to go with Keir Starmer, because the Conservatives have had 14 years to sort that one out, and I don't see any improvements.
When asked which party, led by Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer, would handle the economy best, 30% of people said Labour, 26% said the Tories. And on the NHS, 40% of people thought a Labour government would handle health better than the Tories. And on another big issue, immigration, nearly a quarter preferred Keir Starmer, compared to 18% who said Rishi Sunak. But lots of those we asked, 46%, didn't have faith in either party.
Who's more likeable, Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak?
I think Rishi is.
I think Rishi Sunak I would rather trust. I don't trust Starmer.
As for who should run the country, our poll shows just how undecided some voters are. Asked who would make the best Prime Minister, Keir Starmer edged ahead. But look at the grey bar at the bottom. 44% of voters we asked in these key seats were unsure about who should be Prime Minister.
So difficult to really get behind anyone. It's a pretty sad state to be.
We've already spoke about who we're voting for, and literally neither of us have got an idea.
And it's here where the two leaders will try to set out their vision for the future of Britain.
It'll all come down to how Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer answer those big questions that voters have told us they care about.
What they say and what they do here could prove to be a pivotal moment in this election campaign. Nick Martin, Sky News in Grimsby and Cleethorpes.
Well, Rishi Sunak doubled down on claims that Labour would hike taxes by £2,000 in an interview last night, insisting Labour are going to put people's taxes up. The Conservative claims came under scrutiny last week, though, Keir Starmer accusing the Prime Minister of lying. So how would Labour balance the books? The Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, joins us now. Good to have you on the show.
Hello.
What do you make of the Conservative manifesto, then?
I mean, I kind of wish they would try a bit harder, to be honest. I mean, there's £71 billion of unfunded policy commitments over the course of the next Parliament. And then you look at the numbers, how they think they might pay for some of these things, and they've not even tried. If you look at tax avoidance, for example, they've just gone in each year, in terms of billions, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, with no plan for how they're going to raise it. It's like they've literally just gone on the keyboard, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the fact of the matter is that if they're unfunded policies, we can only assume they will have to borrow money to pay for them. And we know that if you have to borrow loads of money to pay for unfunded policies, it has a direct impact on interest rates and as a consequence, people's mortgages. So not only are we having to pay more in our mortgage because of Liz Truss, but if this Conservative manifesto is enacted, we think families on average will have another £4,800 on top of their mortgage payments.
£71 billion. How are you working that out? Is that if they scrapped national insurance?
No, so that's over the course now of the Parliament. So this number today is based on the manifesto that they've published today, where we've just taken their own policy and their own numbers.
Because I guess my question is, look, there are legitimate questions that we've been asking on this programme about how the Conservative sums add up. I just wonder sometimes if Labour would have, I guess, a bit more of a leg to stand on this stuff, if your own dossiers and rebuttals were a little bit more carefully costed. So,
I think they're very well costed.
You say the £4,800 for your mortgage, and that's based on an assumption that interest rates could go up by 56 basis points every year on average. I mean, is that credible? Is that really going to...
Do you know why it's credible? Because it happened with Liz Truss. I mean, Liz Truss announced unfunded tax cuts. That sent the market spiralling, had a direct impact on interest rates, which led through to people's mortgage rates.
But I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about what's going to happen from now going forward. You know, I mean, Ed Conway, for example, our kind of guru on all this stuff, he tweeted to say, in the interest of my sanity, is there any chance UK Labour and the Conservatives could stop with these ridiculous dossiers? I mean, he's got a point, hasn't he?
Well, look, our manifesto is out on Thursday. Conservative Party manifesto today. All we've done today is look at the Conservatives' own policies and costings. And like I said, I kind of wish they tried a bit harder because it's making our job much easier to point out that they're not even setting out how they're going to pay for these things. I'd take another example. You know, they've said they're going to get this money back from welfare spending, as you've just been talking about. How? I mean, they've not even tried to explain in the document how they're going to raise it, and that's why we have to assume that they don't know how they're going to pay for their policies.
I mean, the other thing that the Conservatives haven't addressed in their manifesto is the projected cuts to public services, particularly, ones that are not ring-fenced. So, you know, if you want to get debt falling by the end of the Parliament, the Resolution Foundation reckon you need about £20 billion of cuts to unprotected departments. It's not addressed in the Conservative manifesto. Is that going to be addressed in the Labour manifesto as well?
So our fiscal rules will be set out in the manifesto, yes, which we've already kind of alluded to. And all of our policies, which are fully funded and fully costed, all the maths will be in what are called the grey pages in the manifesto, which you'll see on Thursday. On departmental spending, though, the Conservatives themselves haven't set out their spending plans for the next financial year. So all we have is the Office for Budget Responsibility projection of the overall budget, but no allocation to how that would be allocated to departments. So if we win the election on July the 4th, we will have to do that. But also the reason we talk a lot about growth is because the long-term route to having properly sustainable funding for public services is one, by growth, and then two, by modernising our public services.
I get the growth argument, I totally get it, but you're not going to get growth on day one, are you?
No.
That's like me saying, oh, Sheffield Wednesday are going to win the Premier League, next season. It's not going to happen, You've got a long-term plan for these things, but you need an immediate plan. And I just feel like the elephant in the room for all parties, including your own, is the unrealistic projections for public spending and the high level of taxation. And I just feel that nobody is really levelling with the public about how difficult that's going to be.
Well, I'm levelling with the public. It is going to be difficult. It's going to be the worst financial inheritance that any party's had since the Second World War. Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, said that as well.
So are you going to have to, really, if you win, are you going to have to impose austerity?
No, but what we are going to do through the 5 or 6 tax loophole changes that we've already announced is raise billions of pounds to go into frontline public services that will need that immediate injection of additional money.
Tax loophole changes? I mean, sounds like the kind of stuff we were just slamming the Conservative Party for.
No, I mean, they've adopted some of our policies. We said we were going to close the non-dom tax loophole. The Tories said, oh, actually, they're going to do that, but they didn't do it properly. We'll do it properly. Private school VAT loophole. Private schools are a private company. They will pay VAT going forward. It will fund 6,500 additional teachers in our state schools. Private equity bonuses.
Look, it's a small fry compared, and you and I know we're talking about the debt, but we're talking about the debt level. We're talking about the huge projected spending cuts to unprotected departments. You can't. VAT on private schools is not going to pay for everything.
No, but the billions of pounds we will raise very quickly will pay for those frontline public service increases very quickly. And then you're right, we've got to do the work from day one on economic growth, but it will take some time for that to come through. But that is our absolute focus, because that's the sustainable route to sustainable financing for public services.
Thank you very much for coming in the studio today. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Darren Jones speaking to us there. Well, I'm sure that story is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll be looking through the front pages on our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 p.m. this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us for that will be the broadcaster and commentator Ali Miraj, speaking with the chief leader writer at The Observer, Sonia Sodo. That's our press preview tonight from 10:30 p.m. Let's bring in our duo for this evening again. We're also going to be talking to our chief political correspondent, John Craig, as well. But let's talk to Guto and Ash first. The Labour Party. How do you think Labour are doing this campaign, Ash?
Well, look, I just saw Darren Jones bouncing out of the studio. I mean, really, he looked like it was Christmas Day and there was like a puppy waiting for him under the tree. And I think that shows you just how confident Labour are feeling going into this election. They've got every reason to feel confident when they look at the polling. When it comes to how strong a Labour government will be, that really does depend on their ability to address the really pressing, systematic issues facing this country when it comes to building infrastructure, when it comes to falling and stagnant wages, when it comes to the NHS. What my worry is that with Labour having boxed themselves in fiscally, they say that they're going to stick to paying down the national debt at basically the same rate as the Tories. Yeah, they'll change a little bit about borrowing for capital investment, but they're not going to borrow for day-to-day spending. And they're also ruling out all sorts of tax rises, apart from in very limited areas. That leaves them either with a massive fiscal black hole or spending cuts.
Okay. It's difficult, though, isn't it? Darren Jones, Ash was just saying, bouncing out of the studio, he says the Conservatives need to try a bit harder. I mean, he certainly looked confident.
I still remember the Sheffield rally where Neil Kinnock thought he was heading into Downing Street and actually had what looked like a victory rally a week before. And we all know what happened in 1992. It didn't work for Labour. There was another 5 years till they're in. Now, that doesn't feel like... It doesn't feel like that now, but neither does it feel like 97, where there was a craving for this young, exciting, dynamic guy, Tony Blair, who just oozed competence and confidence and inspiration. We're not in that. So there's a lot that could happen in the campaign. Default is, quite clear, Labour win.
There you go. I can see it pain you to say that slightly. Now, a very special Sky News event is taking place tomorrow. We're going to be live in Grimsby for the battle for number 10.
Join me on Wednesday as Sky News hosts the battle for number 10. We'll bring you breakfast live from Cleethorpes as we prepare for an eventful day.
Then I'll pick up at 10, finding out what the people of Grimsby want to hear throughout the day.
Join me from 5 for a look behind the scenes before all the pre- and post-event reaction in the spin room.
The main event starts at 7 p.m. I'll be with the audience putting questions to the leaders.
I'll have in-depth interviews with Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer too in the battle for number 10.
And I'll have your news at 10 in Grimsby too, including a first look at what the newspapers made of it.
Get the full story first on the battle for number 10, this Wednesday live from Grimsby.
As the battle for number 10, live on Sky News, coverage will start tomorrow from 7 p.m, the battle for number 10. Well, as we've been saying, very exciting event tomorrow, but the big question, I guess, that we don't know yet is who is going to be grilled first. Is it going to be Rishi Sunak or is it going to be Keir Starmer? Now, we thought we'd kind of go a bit sports, a bit of kind of like football analogy, FA Cup draw style on the Politics Hub tonight, because here is our Chief Political Correspondent John Craig, and he's got a bag. What is going on, John?
Well, the format, briefly, is a 20-minute interview for each leader by Beth Rigby, our political editor, award-winning political editor, and then it's 25 minutes of questions from members of the audience. Some are from the Grimsby area, Cleethorpes area, others from other parts of the country. So, as you say, this is a bag with 2 balls in it. One is red and one is blue.
Stop laughing.
Sorry, there's a bag of balls.
This is not a time for sound bites, but I do feel the hand of history is in this bag right now. Which is going to come out first? Is it going to be the blue ball for Rishi Sunak or the red ball for Sir Keir Starmer? So here we go. Shake them up like they do for the football draws. Right, this is the moment. It's red.
So what does that mean?
That means Sir Keir Starmer goes first.
There you go, Keir Starmer first.
Rishi gets the last word.
Is that, you think they'll be happy with that, the Conservatives?
There it is. Yeah. There it is. The red ball has come out first.
And let's have a look at the other
and
ball.
Just to show that
there's
is
no
not
funny
a fix.
business. It's not a fix.
There's the blue ball.
There's the blue ball as well. There we go. Thank you very much indeed, John Craig there, doing the honours for us. The all-important draw. Thank you both very much for a very busy programme today. It's always great to have you both on, despite the chuckling from Ash. That's it from us tonight, but I will see you tomorrow. Of course, it's our big Grimsby event, the Leaders' Debate. Up next, though, it is the UK Tonight with Matt Barbett. We will see you tomorrow from 7 for the battle for number 10. Go.